At my sister's wedding, she tried to humiliate me, labeling me infertile, divorced, and a failure. But I stood up, said, "Let it begin," and played a live stream exposing years of abuse. One tap shattered their image. In front of a million viewers, I didn't just fight back, I ended the silence. Elena ran a YouTube channel called The Phoenix, where she had built an online community for survivors of emotional abuse. Her videos had been viewed millions of times, and her words resonated deeply with countless viewers. However, her family knew nothing about this. Her father, Richard, was a successful real estate developer. He owned vast tracts of land in upstate New York and had developed one luxury residential area after another. His company, Wilson Estates, was one of the most highly regarded real estate firms in the region. Richard was a perfectionist with a relentless obsession with success. Since Elena was a child, he had imposed strict standards on her and criticized her mercilessly whenever she failed to meet them. Her mother, Vivian, had once been a model. Even now, she maintained her elegance and beauty, occupying an important position in local society. But behind that polished exterior was a chilling coldness. Vivian demanded that her daughter succeed in the way women were expected to. And when Elena began to show more interest in social issues than academics, Vivian called it wasted potential. Elena's younger sister, Chloe, worked as the public relations director at their father's company. She was living the life the family expected, graduating from a prestigious university, working at Wilson Estates, and now preparing to marry Lucas Anderson, the son of a prominent local family. The relationship between Chloe and Elena was complicated. Chloe had always been their parents' favorite and looked down on her older sister as a failure. Elena picked up her phone and checked a message from Chloe about the wedding invitation. She let out a long sigh. 2 years ago, she had ended her 5-year marriage to Nathan. Her family believed she had been abandoned because she was infertile, and they repeatedly blamed her for this perceived flaw. "You still haven't replied," Chloe's message read. "I hope you're not planning to ruin my special day. Don't talk about your miserable divorce in front of everyone. Lucas's family is refined." Elena finished reading the message and gave a dark smile. She moved to the window and looked at the certificates and plaques neatly arranged on her living room wall. Through her online presence, she had built a reputation as an advocate for survivors of emotional abuse and had even established a nonprofit organization. However, she had never told her family about any of it. At a small desk in the corner of the room, she wrote a reply to the wedding reception invitation. "Of course I'll attend," she wrote. "I'm also making special preparations for the family." Elena picked up her smartphone and opened a special app. The screen displayed the words "The Phoenix Live" with the status ready underneath. She took a deep breath. Behind her decision to attend her sister's wedding reception was a plan. Her family believed her ex-husband Nathan was a dropout who was still struggling. In reality, Nathan had become the executive of a successful technology company. The real reason for their divorce was completely different from what her family assumed. Elena opened her closet and took out a modest navy blue dress. This would be her weapon. It was inconspicuous, wouldn't draw attention, but was the perfect attire to unleash the truth hidden in her smartphone. She had kept from her family the fact that her YouTube channel, The Phoenix, now had over 1 million supporters and that her nonprofit organization supporting victims of emotional abuse was thriving. For 2 years, she had been collecting evidence for this day and had made legal preparations. Elena checked her cell phone one last time and confirmed an email from her lawyer. She nodded slightly at the message that read, "All preparations are complete. I won't run away anymore," she quietly told herself. It's time to reveal the truth. The ballroom of the Grand Palace, a luxury hotel in Westchester County, was lavishly decorated for Chloe and Lucas's wedding reception. Crystal chandeliers sparkled from the ceiling and white angled flowers adorned each table. Local dignitaries had gathered to celebrate the union of the Wilson and Anderson families. Elena paused at the entrance to the venue. In her navy blue dress, she had chosen to blend in among the flashy outfits. She checked her smartphone and took a quiet, deep breath. "You finally came." Turning around, Elena saw Vivian standing there in perfect makeup and an expensive champagne gold dress. She looked her daughter up and down, frowning slightly. "You could have dressed up a bit more," she said. "This is a special day. Everyone is watching." Elena gave a gentle smile. "Where's Chloe?" "At the head table, of course." "You're at table 8 with the relatives," Vivian said, then disappeared into the crowd. Elena headed to her assigned seat. At the table sat distant relatives and employees of her father's company. She greeted them quietly and took a sip of water. The voice of the receptions, the MC's voice echoed throughout the venue as Chloe and Lucas appeared on the dance floor, beginning their first dance to a sweet Ed Sheeran tune. Chloe's pure white wedding dress shimmered with beads that reflected the light with every graceful move. Lucas gazed at her lovingly. Elena observed quietly from her seat. In her hand, her smartphone vibrated gently. A message flashed across the screen, "Ready?" After the dance, food was served and champagne glasses were filled. Then came the time for speeches. Richard Wilson stood up first. "We are honored to welcome the Anderson family," he began. His speech was short and not particularly sentimental, but there was unmistakable pride in his voice. "My daughter Chloe has always been our pride. She has the talent and beauty that does justice to the Wilson name." Elena picked up her wine glass and took a sip. Her eyes scanned the room slowly, settling on the projector and screen that had been set up. Vivian's speech centered mostly on herself and her youthful beauty. "Chloe has inherited my beauty," she said with a self-satisfied smile. The audience laughed politely. Then Chloe stood. She looked out at the guests with a sparkling smile. "Today is the happiest day of my life," she said. "I want to thank everyone who supported me, especially my parents. Thank you for showing me the perfect model of life." She glanced briefly in Elena's direction, curling her lips slightly. "And I've prepared a special presentation," Chloe continued. The venue lights dimmed. The screen brightened. A slideshow of family memories began to play, photos of Chloe from childhood to the present. Always beautiful, always successful, always surrounded by her parents. Then she added, "Let me share a little about my sister Elena." The screen changed. In enlarged letters it read, "Elena Brooks. Infertile. Failed marriage. High school dropout. Low-income single." Giggles rippled through the venue, quickly escalating into loud laughter. Elena's photo was projected on the screen, an outdated, unflattering image. She didn't move. Her expression remained calm. But inside, she thought, it's begun. Chloe appeared to be relishing the audience's reaction. "Don't laugh too much, she'll cry," she joked. The room erupted in even louder laughter. Vivian took a sip of wine, her expression blank, but a faint light of pleasure shimmered in her eyes. Richard chuckled and leaned toward Lucas's father, whispering, "Just a joke, right?" Elena slowly stood up. The laughter faltered as people noticed her. One by one heads turned. The noise subsided. "May I say a few words too?" she asked in a quiet, steady voice. Chloe looked confused. This wasn't part of the plan. Of course. Of course. But please keep it short." Elena reached into her bag and pulled out her smartphone. "Let it begin," she said. She tapped the screen. The venue projector flickered. The slideshow vanished. New words appeared on the screen. "The Phoenix Live, the reality of emotional abuse by family," and a viewer counter. The number rapidly climbed, surpassing 1 million. The venue fell silent. At the same time, a live chat box appeared in the corner of the screen, messages streaming in. One stood out in particular, a message from Nathan. "The evidence is gathered. The legal team is standing by. You are not alone anymore." Elena smiled gently. "Ladies and gentlemen, hello," she began. "Let me tell you a little about what I know about the Wilson family." Chloe turned pale and looked toward her parents. Vivian dropped her glass and Richard half rose from his chair. "What are you trying to do?" he said in a low, warning tone. "Just telling the truth," Elena replied. "The truth everyone has been waiting to hear." Her hands didn't tremble. Her eyes were steady, filled with firm determination. She was finally about to unleash the voice that had been silenced for years. In that moment she knew. She wasn't the family's failure. She was the voice of a million people. The smartphone screen continued to stream the live broadcast. Comments poured in. Silence dominated the room. Elena stood at the center of the venue. Her back was straight. Her voice was calm, but her words were ice cold. "Hello to the million people watching this moment live. I am Elena Brooks. Today I break my silence." Chloe half rose from her seat and shouted, "What kind of joke is this? Stop it right now." Elena stared at her sister. "A joke? You like jokes, Chloe. Especially ones that mock me." She tapped her smartphone and pressed a button. Audio began playing through the venue speakers. "Hey Mom, why can't Elena have children?" Chloe's voice. "Her body is broken, just like her life." Vivian's cold laugh followed. "Nathan was right to abandon her. Men want to leave descendants. Elena can't do anything." As the recording continued, Elena turned the phone's camera toward the audience. zooming in on Richard, Vivian, and Chloe. All three had turned ghostly pale. Lucas, looking disturbed, had already shifted his chair slightly away from his fiancée. This, Elena said clearly, was recorded at a family Christmas gathering. A conversation I captured when I stepped away. But there's more. In the next recording, Richard's voice echoed. Elena is a failure. Chloe is my real daughter. Elena was just a mistake. Vivian stood abruptly and shouted, "Stop it. This is eavesdropping. It's illegal." Elena turned to her and calmly replied, "No, Mother. In New York State, recording is legal if one participant in the conversation consents. I consented. And for the abuse I received directly, I am my own witness." Then she played another video from her phone. It showed a 16-year-old Elena returning home from a piano concert. She beamed with joy. "I got second place." "You mean you lost?" Richard said coldly. "The Wilsons are never second. It's either first or nothing." The smile vanished from young Elena's face. "Second out of 25, Dad. Loser." His voice was sharp. He walked away, leaving her in silence. The atmosphere in the venue began to shift. Uncomfortable whispers passed between guests. Many looked uneasy. Lucas's parents were visibly disturbed, whispering urgently to each other. Elena continued, her voice unwavering. "Throughout my life, I've experienced thousands of moments like these. I've constantly been called a loser, defective, a disgrace," Elena said, her voice steady. "But the most cruel was the mockery about my infertility and divorce." She looked up at the screen. "To all viewers, many of you have had similar experiences. Emotional abuse from family is difficult to see and harder to prove. That's why I launched the Phoenix, to collect the voices of abuse survivors and create a community to support them." At these words, Richard suddenly stood up. "What nonsense," he barked. "You've always tried to seek attention. You're ruining Chloe's special day." Elena quietly laughed. "Dad," she said calmly, "I have 1 million followers on YouTube. My book will be published next month. I run a nationwide nonprofit organization. If I wanted attention, I would have had it long ago." The venue fell silent. Surprise spread across Richard and Vivian's faces. They knew nothing of their daughter's success. "You thought I was a low-wage clerk with a failed marriage, a defective woman who couldn't have children," Elena said. "That's because I let you think so. Because I knew, if you knew about my success, you would try to ruin it." Her voice grew stronger. "And what you know about Nathan is also wrong." At that moment, the doors to the venue opened. A tall, confident man entered. It was Nathan Clark. The once awkward young man had transformed into a sophisticated businessman. He walked straight toward Elena. A murmur rippled through the venue. Vivian sank into her chair. Richard turned red with embarrassment. Nathan stood beside Elena and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Elena, I didn't divorce you because you were infertile," he said, his voice carrying. "I couldn't bear your family's abuse anymore. But that was my weakness. I'm sorry I left you alone." He looked around the room. "I'm now the executive of a technology company. After divorcing Elena, I was inspired by her courage. Seeing her recover from her family's abuse helped me rebuild my own life." He pointed toward the screen. "In fact, I've been secretly supporting Elena's nonprofit organization for survivors of emotional abuse. And I've been waiting for the day she would bravely stand up." Suddenly, several people stood up at the back of the venue. They were members of Elena's online community. They nodded toward her, offering silent but powerful support. "We are here with Elena," one woman said, her voice clear. "Her courage has given us the power to reclaim our own voices." Chloe stood frozen in her wedding dress. Her perfect day was crumbling before her eyes. She looked at Lucas, but he was staring into the distance, his expression clouded with confusion. "Elena, why would you do this?" she finally asked, her voice small. "This is my wedding." Elena stared at her sister. "You mocked my life in public for years. You elevated yourself by hurting me." She took a breath. "Today you crossed a line. And I couldn't remain silent any longer," Elena said. Nathan took her hand. "We've been gathering evidence and keeping records of years of emotional abuse by your family. Now, Elena is sharing the truth with millions of people. Tears glistened in Elena's eyes. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of liberation. The liberation of breaking years of silence, and finally speaking the truth. She took a deep breath and spoke her next words clearly. For a long time I was made to believe I was worthless. But today I reclaim my worth. And I send a message to all those in similar situations. You are not alone. Your voice has power. And it's never too late to speak the truth. Nathan smiled beside her. The guilt he once carried for not protecting her had turned into pride in her strength. Richard and Vivian sat speechless. Their perfect facade had crumbled, crushed under the weight of truth. The venue was quiet, but in the online world a storm was raging. Elena's brave action had ignited the hearts of millions. As murmurs spread throughout the ballroom, Richard suddenly stood. His face was red with anger, the veins in his temples bulging. "This is completely inappropriate," he barked. "Elena, you always want attention. Always playing the victim. All of this is just exaggeration. No one in this family has ever hurt you." Elena looked her father straight in the eye. "Really?" she asked. "Then what is this?" She tapped her smartphone. A new recording played. It was the voice of 13-year-old Elena. "And Richard, you're just stupid. Why can't you be like Chloe? She's only 11 but already much smarter than you. You're a disgrace, Elena. A disgrace to the Wilson family." When the recording ended, Richard was speechless. Vivian stood up, her voice strained and flustered, trying to smooth over the situation. This is taken out of context. Richard was just being strict for Elena's own good. We loved her. We were just trying to toughen her up." Elena quietly shook her head. "Love," she whispered. "When was the last time you hugged me? When did you ever celebrate my success?" She turned to the screen and pointed. "Look. My channel helps millions of people. I've written books, given lectures, established a nonprofit organization. But you never once said you were proud of me, because you didn't even know about my success." The atmosphere in the venue began to shift. Many guests were visibly uncomfortable. Some began quietly gathering their things and leaving. Lucas's parents, in particular, looked deeply disturbed. Lucas's father suddenly stood. "What kind of farce is this?" he asked, his voice sharp. "Is this the family we were trying to connect with?" Richard, panicked, tried to approach him, but Lucas's father waved him away. "No thanks. I don't want to be involved in your family issues." Elena, still calm and composed, addressed the room. "Everyone, this is not a farce. This is the truth. And I have legal measures prepared as well. A lawsuit for emotional abuse." She held up her smartphone. On the screen was an email from a law firm. "I've been collecting evidence for 2 years. And my lawyers say I have enough to proceed. Preparations for a damages lawsuit for emotional abuse are complete." At these words, the color drained from Richard's face. As a real estate developer, he understood exactly what impact such a public scandal would have on his business. "Elena, we're family," he said suddenly, his tone shifting into something almost pleading. "Family matters should be resolved within the family." Elena smiled, tired but unflinching. "Now you bring up the importance of family," she asked. Then, continuing the live broadcast, she turned toward Nathan. "We know what real family is. It's not just blood ties. It's the connection between people who respect and cherish each other." At that moment, something unexpected happened. Lucas stood up. He stepped away from Chloe's side. Slowly, deliberately, he walked toward Elena. I don't intend to marry into such a family," he said, facing Chloe. Chloe turned pale. "What are you saying? This is all lies. Elena has always just been jealous." Lucas shook his head. "I've seen how you talk about your sister these past few months. How much you despise her. And today you've shown it in public. I don't want to spend my life with someone like that." He approached Elena and stood before her. "I respect your courage. Thank you for becoming the voice of so many people who've suffered abuse." The venue fell silent again. Chloe began to cry, her perfect makeup smearing as the weight of humiliation and collapse hit her. Elena took a deep breath. She had one final truth to share. "I must speak one more truth about my divorce and infertility," She looked at Nathan. He gave a solemn nod. I am not a failure. The divorce wasn't because Nathan stopped loving me. It was because he couldn't stand up for me. Nathan nodded sadly. I was weak. Watching Elena suffer under her family's cruelty, I couldn't protect her, and I ran from that guilt. It was the biggest mistake of my life. Elena continued. And, let me reveal the truth about infertility. She hesitated for a moment, but she quickly steeled her resolve. According to the doctor's diagnosis, she said clearly, it wasn't me who was infertile, it was Chloe. She inherited Dad's DNA. A murmur rippled through the venue. Chloe shuddered. All color drained from her face. That's a lie, she cried out. Elena's voice remained quiet, but unshakable. When I had tests done, the doctor said there was no issue with my reproductive ability. But what about you, Chloe? I know you and Lucas have been trying to conceive. And failing. She turned to the guests, then continued. It's a medical fact. Dad's DNA abnormality is only passed to female children. At that truth bomb, Richard sank into his chair, trembling. His secret, his genetic defect, something he had hidden his entire life, was now public. Chloe turned to her parents, eyes wide. Is this true? Vivian couldn't say a word. She simply covered her face with her hands. This was a truth even she hadn't known. Elena spoke softly now, but her words cut deeper than ever. After I got divorced, you all forced me to carry the label of defective. But in reality, the defect was elsewhere. The entire venue was engulfed in silence. Lucas stepped away from Chloe and walked over to join his parents. The Anderson family quietly began preparing to leave. Elena turned the camera toward the live audience, her voice calm and strong. The truth can sometimes be painful, but it is the truth that sets us free. Today I spoke my truth. And by doing so, I have become free. Nathan held her hand and stood by her side. Members of Elena's online community gathered around her, forming a circle of love and support. It was the true turning point of her life. 1 year later, at a Barnes & Noble bookstore in New York City, the crowd was overflowing. A book signing event was being held for Elena Brooks's newly released memoir, Silent No More. The line stretched outside the store, with hundreds of people waiting to meet her. Elena had become a nationally recognized advocate for survivors of emotional abuse. The Phoenix Foundation, which she founded, was now internationally recognized, running programs across multiple countries. She regularly appeared on television and gave lectures across universities and conferences as a leading voice in emotional recovery and advocacy. Next to the table sat Nathan Clark. Though they hadn't remarried, they were bound by a deep friendship and a mutual mission. Together they ran the Phoenix, each leveraging their strengths to grow the movement. Ready for the next lecture tour? Nathan asked during a quiet moment. Elena smiled. Yes. Everything's going well. We're starting in California. 12 cities in total. After the signing, Elena returned to her office in a midtown high-rise. From her window, she could see the tranquil green canopy of Central Park. She stood in silence for a moment, gazing out. So much had changed in a single year. The wedding reception that once tried to shame her had, unknowingly, become the moment that reshaped everything. Not just for her, but for thousands of others who had once felt voiceless. The beginning of the end. Richard's real estate company, Wilson Estates, had lost its reputation and was forced to downsize after his abusive behavior went viral online. Many of his long-standing business partners swiftly cut ties. Once a commanding figure, Richard had become a reclusive man, far from his former confident, domineering self. Vivian, too, had withdrawn from society. Many of her former friends avoided her, and social invitations had all but vanished. The ugliness behind her perfect exterior had been exposed, and with it, she lost her place in the social circles she once ruled. And Chloe? Her engagement to Lucas had been broken off. She left her father's company and moved to another town. Elena occasionally heard whispers about her through acquaintances, but there had been no direct contact. That changed one quiet afternoon. Elena's thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. "Elena, someone wants to see you," her assistant said gently. The door opened, and there stood Chloe. She wasn't wearing her usual designer fashion. Instead, she wore simple jeans and a sweater. Her face had almost no makeup, and there were dark circles beneath her eyes. "May I come in?" Chloe asked hesitantly. Elena, surprised, nodded toward a chair. "Please." Chloe sat slowly, folding her hands in her lap. "I read your book," she said quietly. "It was wonderful." Elena said nothing, waiting. Chloe took a deep breath. "I came to apologize for everything I did to you." Tears welled in her eyes. "I'm seeing a counselor now. I realize I was receiving the same treatment from Dad. And I targeted you because I didn't want to become a target myself." Her voice trembled. "I was trying to protect myself by hurting you. It was cowardly, terrible, and unforgivable." Elena felt a wave of emotion rise, pain, anger, confusion, and a deep, tangled love. "Healing takes time, Chloe," she said at last. "But it's not impossible." Chloe looked up, hopeful. "Really? I don't know if we can build a relationship of trust again," Elena replied honestly. "But it's worth trying, especially if you're truly ready to face yourself." They sat in silence for a moment. Not a reconciliation, but a quiet agreement. First step. Few weeks later, another book signing for Elena's latest release, Silent No More, was underway. The line stretched down the hall, filled with eager readers. Elena continued signing, smiling, connecting, offering short conversations to each visitor. Beside her, as always, sat Nathan. Not as a husband, but as a loyal friend and business partner. And nearby, quietly helping as a volunteer, was Chloe. She didn't seek attention. She simply worked modestly, sincerely. As Elena signed another book, she paused to look at the long line, the faces of people who had come to see her. Once called a failure, she had now become a symbol of hope for millions. She smiled warmly at the next reader, opened the book, and lifted her pen. She wrote her trademark phrase, "Your voice has power. Don't be silent anymore, Elena Brooks." And I had to be honest about that. Anger isn't always the best form of retaliation. Sometimes mending is. Their comments have no more power since it is creating a life that is so full of purpose and tranquility. Set limits, mature subtly, and let your accomplishments speak for you if you're harboring pain. To be heard, you don't have to shout. Tell your tale in the comments if you have ever experienced betrayal, silence, or being made to feel inferior. This is not a place for condemnation but for healing. Have you ever used your suffering as a source of strength? I'd be curious to know how.